thanks for your presentation. I mean, really very pertinent in our growing multicultural region. Just want to talk about where this sits, and I guess as a CCO of council, you understand you need to deliver to the Auckland plan. Where do you see this fitting in that? Because it doesn't say that in here, and I mean, I'd say that, yeah, first that's the question, but we need to make sure that we're just not making policies that don't fit into that strand, and if it already fits somewhere, that's great, but I'd you know, wonder where you see, where does it fit and which part of the Auckland plan does it deliver on, and which current policies might it already slot into or reflect what you're doing, reflect the policy we already have?
So it does, there is a section on where...
Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at this.
In the back of the strategy, links to related policies and plans, and on page 11 and 12 of the strategy. So there are very strong links with the Auckland plan, with the Arts and Culture Strategic Action Plan, Children and Young Persons Plan, clearly, the Māori Plan for Tamaki Makaurau, and the Economic Development Strategy. So there, it's very clear links.
So you don't think we need to make another policy? Just that
it's a really good question.
Supported by across a tranche of policies we've already got?
So these are plans rather than policies,
they come
aren't
out
they?
of policies.
So it's,
yeah.
I wouldn't have said that we did. However, I know talking to council officers, they have been saying perhaps we should look at a policy. What we want to see is a national policy for languages, actually. And I think Auckland Council could show the way in that by creating a policy. So from that point of view, there could be a really valuable advocacy role for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I'm just picking up on one of the key issues you've identified here in the draft strategic action plan. That's to do with language teaching. I'm just, it makes the, you know, the very pertinent observation here that in many cases really languages are declining in schools. So I'm just wondering what communication or what research of the Ministry of Education or the Education Department, whomsoever, you've been able to draw upon, because it would seem to me not only declining, but in some subjects the people actually doing it are native speakers, so like Japanese or even a high percentage of Korean people. So I suggest the figures are actually even worse than they might appear if you take the kind of traditional New Zealand student. And if you have communicated with the ministry, to what extent is that decline linked to the fact that the languages are often appear to be a lot more difficult for students to do, and the standard demanded, comparable to other subjects, is appreciably higher. So,
can I answer
have they said that?
I see you jumping.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I used to be a principal here in Auckland at Willow Park School, 650 kids. We had weekly Mandarin lessons for all our year 3, 4, 5 and 6. It's 400 kids. It's possible, it's not in a too hard basket. Don't put it there. Okay, this is all possible. At the moment, the government's put $10 million of contestable funding towards Asian language learning in schools, and going through a process at the moment supporting schools doing that. This is against a 27% drop in Asian language learning in the last 10 years in secondary schools. Now, I'm talking about Asian languages, but across the board, we're in a bad state with languages. We're going backwards when, in fact, all those reasons up there, we should be going forward. So don't put it in a too hard basket. It is possible, it can be done, and we need your support.
I guess what the point I was getting at is when students get to year 10, 11, 12 and 13, it inevitably declines, and if you look at the standard required to pass language exams in Japanese and other subjects is actually at a lot higher level than the other subjects people do. So one would make the assumption then that the part of the reason why it's declining is because the subjects are really difficult when you get to that senior part of secondary school.
Yeah, that perceived difficulty is probably one factor. More is a shortage of teachers with fluency and teaching skills. But the worst issue is we don't have enough language teaching at primary and intermediate level, which is actually where your brain learns language most effectively.
Yeah.
Languages don't become compulsory till secondary, and even then it's often a little bit of German and a little bit of Japanese and a little bit of whatever else, and kids cherry pick, which means they get to year 11 and they haven't got enough of any one language to be able to engage with NCEA. So I think it's a structural issue is the main thing.
And when they do engage with NCA, then the difficulty makes them then not
Because
pursue
they
it.
don't have that background.
Wow.
Perhaps I could just add to that, there is actually no policy supporting the learning or teaching of languages other than Te Reo in the primary school system until year 7, and consequently starting languages at year 7 is an unrealistic expectation. So we have this structural problem with the ministry about that, and there are significant debates going on. However, the research from Professor Stephen May indicates that the reasons that many young people don't take up languages is that they're not seen in the civic domain. They're not seen outside their family or church or community group. So if the wider society doesn't signal that the languages are important or significant, kids think, oh, well, it's just mum and dad and the old fogies who speak it. So that's why Professor May is saying if we want children to learn languages, if we want to make them significant in our society, the civic domain has to give signals to young people in schools that this is a valued thing to do. And in those circumstances, there are no difficulty in the secondary schools with dealing with Asian or other languages if they can be strengthened in the primary school system, which Jeff's system in Asia New Zealand Foundation is doing amazing experimental work with a large number of schools in that area.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you. And Susan, a very thoughtful presentation, and you've certainly got us all thinking very hard about it. Can I ask my question to you in the context of someone who really does appreciate the importance of language diversity, and as the Auckland legacy, the person who secured Auckland City's support for the Lantern Festival and Pacifica. My concern is that we too often let government off the hook, and Auckland Council is coming in and financially bailing out so many projects at a time where we can't even deliver on some of our own commitments within the Auckland plan on issues as boring as infrastructure. So how do you see this sitting? I mean, I'm really, really keen to support you, but I'm not keen to see us get into yet more financial commitments that we are going to be unable to meet. So I'd really like your reflections on what you can do in partnership with us, but putting the financial responsibility on central government where it should reside.
Yes, I think that if you look at the actions in the strategy, most of them are actually for government and or community, but there's an advocacy role that all of us need to take to be saying to government, this is a resource and we expect you to be spending some of our taxpayer money on it because it's important for the country. And I think that the actions that are in the strategy for council, many of them are things council are already doing, and they're things that can be done within the normal way of working of council. So, for example, bilingual signage is a really simple thing. It's not about going out and replacing all the signs in the city tomorrow. It's about, as things need replacing, choosing to do so bilingually, potentially at almost zero cost. So it's more that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
I was very interested, Susan, to hear you say that there was a companion paper coming which would outline everything that Auckland Council's doing. I think they probably need to come together so that people see the real value in that. Can you tell me a bit more about that work and when we can expect it?
So what we're aiming for is not something just that says what Auckland Council is doing, but all the things that are happening to support languages in the city. And we send out a survey-ish thing late last year, and we've got some input from some organisations, and we're aware we're going to need to really be much more proactive about getting the information. And the goal is that that would be available on a website, that people can go and see if I want support for X or Y, or if I want to know what's happening in Z, then I can look at this table on a website and see the various things that are happening. And I know that Auckland libraries have populated their part of that table, and it's already incredibly a lot of things. So it's about pulling all of those things together, which is one thing we would really like to ask support for from this group, that perhaps you could be asking council officers to be feeding back to us the things that are happening.
Okay. My other thought was simply that the civic engagement is absolutely critical to this council, and we've just proved recently that we haven't had good civic engagement with our migrant, refugee, Pacifica and Maori communities. And so there's got to be learnings for us in this. And my last question was just to ask you if you'd gone to the Pacific Peoples Panel, the Disability Strategic Advisory Group and the Ethnic Peoples Panel with it, just to get feedback.
So those are all the next stage, and yes, we will be. And the IMSB. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions for the officials, if I may. Either Dean's gone, so Roger, you may be able to answer this, but what obligations does the council have in regard to the encouragement or promotion of te reo, or given that as one of the 3 official languages, do we have any obligations to encourage or promote the language?
Well, I wouldn't say it's spelled out in the legislation, but certainly the legislation establishes it is, as you say, one of the 3 official languages of New Zealand. But we have, as a council, we've undertaken an obligation to promote te reo, for example. Just to give you an example of that, well, that's what the Te Waka Angamua group is promoting, the use and learning of te reo throughout the council organisation, is practice we're already doing. Also, we celebrate language diversity through supporting Māori and Pacifica Language Week. So, internally within the organisation, we actively promote it in those sort of means.
And in terms of working on developing an Auckland languages strategy, what would be the resources required for that? And Councillor Fletcher has touched on that, but are we aware of what kind of resources we would require, or do Common have their own resources to follow up on the strategy?
So, well, I think the situation is Comet has put its resources into developing the draft strategy, and they're now asking whether we would, or the council would be prepared to endorse that. So, but to do that, we'd have to review that strategy and give you advice back on what the resource implications might be. So, and the general principle that we're following here is you've told us you want us to get on with action, not more strategies. And so, but I can maybe illustrate to you that we already have in place Auckland Council communication guidelines, which encourage council departments to communicate with Aucklanders in a range of formats and languages to help ensure all communications are accessible. So we already have those sort of measures in place. It is aligned to Chapter 2 of the Auckland Plan about the People chapter, which points out we're amongst the most diverse, culturally, ethnically diverse cities in the world, and that we celebrate that diversity and we encourage the languages of that multi-ethnic community. So I think there's a lot already in place that but what I'm suggesting we do is we have a good look at the draft strategy when it comes out and see if there's more actions that might be built into existing mechanisms.
And your officials will supply us with a report to cover all those issues?
Yes, we'll do that, yes.
Including costs?
Including costs.
Yes.
Councillor and I.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a strong supporter of this, and picking up on what Councillor Fletcher had said, it's really central government's responsibilities. Comet is our CCO who's putting together a policy and strategy for us to deliver this, and looking for our support so government can give them the support to deliver this. I mean, I think New Zealand has actually failed a lot as far as languages are concerned. Just remember, each year we bring into New Zealand thousands of students internationally to learn English. What are we doing about teaching our students to learn the languages of the world today? And for those who do business in China and those who are now studying Chinese in Auckland, they're the lucky ones of the future, because the doors are going to be wide open for them. And so what you're telling us here, we should be thinking strongly about opening that door wider and getting more of our young people to master these languages, especially of where the business is going to happen tomorrow. And so my concern is, we know that the budget for COMET has been cut quite tragically, and how are we going to be able to get this going? I think they're wanting our endorsement to be able to go to government with cap in hand and say, look, we've got the endorsement of council and we need to deliver this. And just as a side, I want to tell you this, Samoan government itself sends 60 students to China per year to learn Chinese. That's what they're doing, because they realise that the business between those two places are growing and there's a need to master it. Having travelled many times up there on the business side of things, language is essential in these countries to make things happen. So I strongly support what they're trying to do and ask you all to endorse what they're trying to achieve, because it's important for the future of New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose the first question I want to ask is what traction you are having with MOE, because I'll just go with the Reo strategy at the moment. There are only 2 places in New Zealand plus a private training institution in the area, basically Waikato University, Auckland, and the private institution that are teaching, that are bringing through teachers. So if we can hardly get that traction in this big area, how are we going to get that traction with Polynesian, Hindi, Chinese, Mandarin, etc.?
Yes, we are constantly talking about this with the Ministry of Education. We need it to be addressed at 2 levels. So we need to be addressing it at the policy level, and Te Reo Māori is the one area where government can support, recognises they need to support and need to be pushed further to support properly. And the current push from government to develop a strategy for Te Reo Māori is an opportunity for that. There's also the on-the-ground work that we can do, maybe despite government, and the example that Jeff gave of the schools working on Asian languages, that model is now being used for Te Reo Māori as well, and it's a community-based model that gets around the issue that we don't have enough of a supply of qualified teachers. So happy to talk with you further about that.
And the second question is, I mean, we dropped the ball once before in New Zealand regarding languages. New Zealand was settled by Chinese, French, German, but somehow English came through as being the #1 language. Are you certain that by developing the strategy we can do that again, we can stop that again? Because one of the things that used to always amaze me was my Dutch friends, when they went back to Holland, said that, went back to the Netherlands, they said they were getting ripped off because people could tell their accent straight away. And they spoke with a Dutch with a New Zealand accent, and they were getting ripped off all the time. So, I mean, how are we going to kind of get over that thing again where that happens?
So this is just a strategy, and I don't think it's going to perform miracles is probably the answer. But it's a start. And what we need is a national languages policy. And as Councillor Anai said, one of the things we need to get that to happen is for government to pay attention and to have Auckland Council say, languages are important to us. We're adopting a strategy to work on that. Has a communication value for government that then might have a greater effect. So I think there's so much we can do in Auckland, and by bringing our efforts together we can make a difference. As Jeff says, we can't give up hope, we haven't, and we need government to step up, which is why we're asking for endorsement.
And the final question relates to this strategy. From an IMSB point of view, we would be looking at this strategy to complement the Reo strategy, not to pull from it. in such a way. I mean, there's synergies there, but I suppose that's the question. Are you sure that you can that we can go with this strategy and not pull from the focus of the reo?